Hi, this week we're talking about social media and the way that social media relates to productivity and the capitalist marketplace. Social media was intended to be a way for people to connect to each other. And for the beginning of its short history, it was really remarkable at doing so. It allowed people to connect to long lost family members and friends that they never thought they would be able to reach. It still has that purpose. But it also has had an unintended consequence that has emerged in the last decade that social media has become really widely used. It's associated with increased social isolation and self-esteem problem, especially in teens, but also in adults. There have been a lot of loneliness studies that have shown that loneliness has increased in the last 2 decades. And although it has not been caused by social media exclusively, social media use, when social media use is really frequent and heavy, it can exacerbate existing feelings of loneliness. So 25% of Canadians are online almost constantly, according to a Pew Research study that came out last year, which, that's kind of like an existential state of being, to be basically either checking your phone consistently or, engaging with social media throughout the day, either on a computer or on your phone, kind of on a continuous basis. And that does include messenger stuff, like if you're texting or messengering people. So it's too early to know how that is impacting our mental health, what impact that has on human beings, because it's only been about 10 years that we've lived like that. And it's been such a dramatic change in the way that human beings function on a day-to-day basis that it certainly has really major kind of social, emotional, cognitive implications that a lot of scientists simply don't comprehend yet, because there hasn't been enough time to really to look at the impacts. It's so new. So just a brief history of social media for people who might not be super familiar with what came before what we use now. Social media really started in the year 2002 with wasn't an app. There were no apps then. It was just a website called Friendster. And that was followed by MySpace in 2003. Friendster was only around for, I'm going to say, maybe 5 years at the very most. I don't even think it lasted that long. It was very popular. It became very popular very quickly. When I was in university, it started, and everyone I knew got a Friendster account, and it was the first time that any of us had interacted on social media before, and it was really, really kind of a shocking new experience for people. The pages were not dynamic, so there was no news feed. Let me see if I can try to explain how it works. Basically, you had a page that you populated with pictures, and then you wrote a little bit about yourself, and like people would write like their favorite quote, their favorite books. It was like a little profile. And then you had there was a place where people could leave testimonials, which are basically just like recommendations that they would leave of you. And it was this really awkward format because people wouldn't address the person directly that they were writing to. They would talk about the person in the third person as though they were basically creating an ad copy for this person. So like on my page, for example, Catherine, there's my picture, here's my little information that I write about myself. Then there were a number of testimonials that my friends would have left me, like, Catherine is such a great friend, blah, blah, blah. Catherine and I have so much fun when we blah, blah, blah. And so there's this list of these weird, today it looks like reviews. We didn't see it that way because online reviews weren't as much of a thing. It was very odd. And people would leave you a testimonial and it would just stay there. And there was no reply function. It was just basically this list of things that people wrote. And then people would talk about the testimonials that were left on each other's walls. And it was, sometimes people would be, they would leave scandalous things in a testimonial, and it was the source of a great deal of social excitement. But it was, it wasn't the kind of thing that was updated in real time because people didn't have smartphones. And so, for example, you couldn't say to someone, hey, meet me at the library at 3, because you couldn't assume that someone would be checking their Friendster page before 3. right? The only way that people were updating and checking their social media was on their desktop or laptop computers, which they may only have done a couple of times a day. So they didn't work as like actual social apps where you could, make plans or catch up with people the way that Facebook and, all Snapchat and Instagram all really are basically real time now, because we're continuously checking our devices to see what's new. So that was a kind of a major structural difference between Friendster and MySpace and what came after. So Facebook was founded in 2005, and I'm sure most of you know this, but maybe not all of you. It was founded by Mark Zuckerberg when he was a Harvard student, and it was only open to students at Ivy League universities when it was first founded. The Ivy League being Harvard, Yale, Brown University, Stanford University, Princeton, Dartmouth, Cornell, and maybe there's one more. So there's just basically the fanciest, most expensive, and selective universities in the United States. And you had to have an email address from one of the Ivies in order to create an account. So like harvard.edu or brown.edu. And then finally, it was so popular when it became the sensation in the Ivy League that Zuckerberg decided to make it available to everybody. And most people in my age group started using it in 2007. That's when I created an account. And the rest is history. So that's just to kind of give you a context. It's all very new. Really none of this existed before 2002. And the kind of real-time updated stuff wasn't really in use until about 2010, honestly. So it's really only been a decade. And it's accelerated because our uses of our devices have accelerated, and they're interconnected because we need our devices in order to access the apps, and their interests are, we will see, one and the same. Social media, like I said, was a huge hit right away. People loved it, they took to it, and companies could see that these were potentially enormously profitable platforms. And the challenge was to figure out how to make them as profitable as possible, how to create a business model, a revenue model that maximized profitability. So the commodity that is being bought and sold in this marketplace of social media platforms is attention, and also, of course, data. Attention being the user's attention, our eyeballs, what we look at on our screens and for how long. And then, of course, our data, how much data we put about ourselves into our posts, how we engage with content, because of course that data is sold to basically marketing analytics companies that then are able to design algorithms that serve consumers, advertising and marketing that is really, really carefully tailored to their preferences, right? So I don't really go into the whole data, the sale of our data in this lecture. It's a huge, huge topic kind of in and of itself. I'm mostly talking about attention as the commodity, how much time and how attentively we are focusing on the apps, because that's a whole other dimension of how our attention and our use of these platforms is commodified. So companies began to compete over the amount of time they could keep you looking at their products. They needed to create platforms and content that was really kind of just irresistible, and that you wanted to keep coming back to again and again. We think of our phones and our apps as addictive. That's kind of a cliche now, but it's not an innate quality of our phones or of the apps. These devices are designed to be addictive. They're programmed in order to extract the most attention from us, because that attention, that time spent looking, determines how much advertising revenue is earned on the platforms. So basically, the revenue model of social media companies is organized around the amount of time you spend looking at your feed. The more time you spend looking at it, the more time advertisers can assume you're seeing their ads. So the longer time you spend, the more money the platforms are able to make from advertising. So that means that the companies, social media companies, say Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, are trying to keep you engaged for as long as they possibly can. The number of users is important, but even more important is the amount of time that users spend on the apps. So if you have a platform that has millions of users, but no one's ever using the app because it's boring to use, that company is a failure compared to a company with, for example, fewer users, but users are constantly engaging. They're constantly coming back. They're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. It's that endless scrolling that is earning the company's money. So in this way, your time and attention are the commodity. They are the thing that is being traded for money. That includes your engagement, clicks, likes, comments, follows, all the things that you do when you're interacting with other people on social media. Those are also monetized and commodified by the platforms. So you're encouraged to do those kinds of things because they mean more money for the platforms. A more engaged user base is one that spends more time on the apps. If you're commenting, that means you're probably going back to check if people commented on your comment. If you're liking stuff, that means you probably want people to be liking your stuff. So you're checking back to see if your content got any likes. All of this sort of psychology is very carefully engineered by the apps to have you engaging as much as possible.